What's up, everybody? Welcome back to a new episode for End of the Week, an international relations, national security podcast and news review show. This is going out on 18 April 2026. So glad that you're here with us. I'm really have been so overwhelmed by so much stuff that is happening this week. It is rodeo week here in Grand Junction, Colorado. That is for Colorado State University. So much fun stuff. I have really enjoyed doing everything rodeo related. I literally just took off my cowboy hat. Sometimes you just gotta, if you can't beat them, join them kind of thing. So it's really exciting. I love rodeo week. I'm super excited. But we've also got a lot of stuff happening within the realm of international relations and national security. But before we get into that, I do have a few favors to ask you. If y'all would gently caress that like button, let the algorithm know that you like what you're hearing, that you like what you're seeing, and that you get some value out of this. You can go ahead and also please press that subscribe button. That way you can show YouTube or Spotify or whatever it is that you like what I'm doing, that you want to continue to be a part of what I am doing. And they can introduce people who are just like you to what you're listening to. And also, if you want to know when videos are dropped, you can hit the gong of a notification bell, especially now. I know I've talked about other ones that I've been working on, but this one I've actually got a lot of the research done. I'm hopefully going to start recording it a little bit later this week. I've got a cool project that I'm working on when it comes to architecture, politics, all kinds of interesting stuff. Also, I have just recently posted a new article on my Substack, which you can find at whiskymo.substack.com. I will post a link to the story in the thing below. It is A10s and Decisions. It is a discussion about appropriations, about canceling of weapon systems, about the importance of the A10, what it does, a little bit of history, a little bit of my opinions. It's a short read, maybe about 6-7 minutes. I would love if you go and read it because I think it's really important to have these conversations. Hopefully you can learn something about the A10. You give a little personal vignette at the beginning of the story. It's going to be awesome. I think that you will enjoy it. If you're listening to this, I know you'll enjoy it. So go ahead, check it out. Again, it will be a link in the description. Go ahead, check that all out. So we've got two stories today that I want to talk about. One is an actual story. The other is kind of a reaction and an expansion on a story that I read earlier this week that I think is phenomenal from one of my favorite writers in the national security space, someone who has caused not a small bit of good, in my opinion, good controversy, especially in the founding of his thing, but we'll get to that in a minute. But one of the most important stories that has come out this week has been the results of the election of Hungary. Hungary, their 16-year leader, Viktor Orban, was coming up in election as a prime minister. And it's one of the things that a lot of us had been keeping track of because Orban's politics, Orban's party had been moving Hungary significantly to the right. And in fact, many of us, myself included, had considered Viktor Orban to be essentially another fascist, another authoritarian in waiting. He had changed a lot of the laws and the constitution of Hungary to make it so that it was going to be nearly impossible for him to get out of office. He had stacked the Constitutional Court and the Supreme Court of Hungary with sycophants who would essentially do his bidding. But this week, April 12th, which was about 5 days ago, I believe it was the day after our last episode dropped, Hungary had an election, and they elected center-right Peter Magyar to the new prime ministership. So Hungary isn't like the U.S., for those of you who don't know, they do more of a parliamentarian system, which means that people vote for a party and they vote for their candidates in the parliament, and then whoever holds the significant number of seats gets to elect the prime minister. And in most cases, they have already decided who that was going to be. And what made this one so powerful is that the voice of the people, they created essentially a supermajority in Hungary's parliament where it's going to have a hard time not for the opposition parties to countermand their strength. It's a really interesting perspective onto what is happening within Europe, within the so-called more conservative movement across the globe, this kind of right movement that has been happening. It's it's very interesting because there is a concern within the political establishment across what we would historically call the West or developed nations, but it's really just the United States, Europe, Australia, New Zealand, with this rise of ultra right-wing nationalistic and fascistic ideologies that are becoming more and more popular. Viktor Orban is certainly representative of that. And there was a lot of concern about what was going to happen, and about how much power that Orban had begun to wrap around himself, and he had become very cozy with Russian President Vladimir Putin. He was one of the deciding factors that was constraining support for Ukraine after the second invasion of Ukraine by Russia in 2022. So was one of those things that I think we were not sure, those of us who were watching were sure that this was actually going to happen. The ability for people to have free and fair elections is one of the most important things to uphold the idea of kind of this traditional liberal democracy, little L, not big L, little L liberal democracy that we have, that had been spreading across the globe pretty consistently for 80 years since the end of World War II. And the ability of some of these strong men to come in on the wings of democracy and change so that they can hold power. I mean, that's essentially what's happened in Russia. It was happening in Brazil for a minute. There are other places that this happened. This happened with Venezuela, with Hugo Chavez. And they are some serious concerns that we have here. And it's good to see that the people were happy about this. They were willing to change. They wanted to they were protesting. They were willing to make change, and they made it in a way that it was going to be unassailable, the outcome. And I think this is going to hopefully help chart a more beneficial pathway for the EU, for NATO, for a lot of the future of that block of nations that has a very significant chunk of the world GDP, the NATO alliance, all those things. And it's interesting to see because the Trump administration had been stumping for Orban. J.D. Vance twice made a trip there. He made one the day before, making some very bold claims about EU interference, even though EU was very silent leading up to the election, and only the Trump administration was taken aside on this. And it concerns me, the fact that someone like J.D. Vance would be stumping for Viktor Orban, who is fairly well known for being a very illiberal actor on the stage. And it kind of harkens back to some of the things that, as I look in history and we talk about some of the actions of the United States when it comes to right-wing dictators and the way that we have supported them in the past, it's very upsetting and very disconcerting that is something that we are very comfortable supporting, right-wing dictators in the name of containment of some sort of fearful ideology that has never really taken place. So I'm interested to see how this continues to go on. Once Magyar gets into office, I'm interested to see what he does, because he's still got an uphill road to climb. As I said earlier, some of the other prongs of government are beholden to Viktor Orban. So we'll see how contentious his relationship with the other branches of government are going to be. And it's something that bears watching. I think it's really important for us to notice what's happening, because these kinds of things affect the United States. We do not live in a vacuum. The United States is affected by the outcomes of other nations' political activities. And ostensibly, Hungary is a partner for us in the NATO alliance, as well as other military and bilateral agreements that we have. So in my mind, anytime that we can make a step towards democracy, a more liberal democracy in the world, it's a great thing. So congratulations to Peter Magyar. I hope that you have a very successful term as Prime Minister. I hope you bring the country of Hungary back in line more with the international rules-based order, with liberal democracy. And while you and I will definitely disagree on a lot of things political-wise, because you are center-right, I wish you all the best success in taking care of the people of Hungary. Second story that we're going to talk about today is a really interesting story that was written by Ryan Evans, of the founder of War on the Rocks, and he has a story on War on the Rocks called "Tactical Success, Strategic Failure: Washington Walks the Path to Defeat in Iran." And I find this topic absolutely fascinating because it continues a trend since essentially Vietnam, right? The essential thesis of Mr. Evans' work is that the U.S. military is tactically and technically superior to anything else that has ever existed. They can continue to win the battles, but the United States is going to lose the war. And what does he mean by this? The problem is that the United States and the Trump administration have failed to acknowledge or even bring about what the strategic outcomes of this conflict with Iran is meant to be. What is our goal? Is it regime change? Is it security on energy prices? Is it security of our allies and partners in the region? Every time the question is asked, we've been given a new answer. And this is, one, infuriating because it doesn't give the troops who are fighting or the people that are trying to support them an actual idea of what the stated outcome is. We don't have a goal to aspire to. All we have are platitudes and numbers of munitions expended. And again, the United States has always been very tactically and technically proficient, especially after the end of World War II. We can see it in, first, the success of World War I and World War II. It was the introduction of the United States Armed Forces that helped turn the tide in both of those wars. Korea, the success of that, and even though technically the war is still going, we're only under an armistice, the United States is essentially the reason that the 38th parallel is the dividing line on the peninsula. It was after the encirclement of Busan and Pusan that the United States were able to overcome the communist forces of North Korea and China, push them back, and we were able to maintain the status quo that we have today. The Vietnam War, tactically proficient. The Americans are very good at fighting battles. You can see it. I reference it in my piece that I wrote today, that I published. I say today because I'm recording this on the 17th. It was published Friday, so published yesterday, about how, we talk about like the battles of Ai Drang in We Were Soldiers Once and Young, the movie We Were Soldiers. It's a great movie. There's some historical inaccuracies in the way that it's portrayed, but the purpose is still there. The United States military didn't lose the battles, but they lost the war because of political ineptitude, a lack of strategic outcomes and goals. The last time that you could objectively say that American forces have won the battle and won the war are two or three times within the 80s. We have Grenada and we have Panama, and then we also have the Desert Storm conflict in 91. All three of those things, which, correct myself, I said two, it's three, they had limited goals, limited strategic outcomes, and essentially an end date, right? So in Grenada, when the Cubans seized Grenada, the United States went in, they rescued the American students and ousted the Cubans to return the government of Grenada to its rightful place. In Panama in 89, the idea was to remove Manuel Noriega, to bring him back to the United States, where he could be tried on an indictment for drugs. I believe it was drug smuggling and some finance crimes. And then in 91, Desert Shield was a buildup to protect our allies and partners after the Saddam Hussein's Iraqi Republican Guard forces invaded Kuwait. And then Desert Storm was the expulsion of those forces from Kuwait and also the push into parts of Iraq. And while George Bush the Bush could have obviously continued to push until Baghdad and removed, he stopped when they achieved the objective of freeing Kuwait from Iraqi forces, which was the stated outcome of Operation Desert Storm. Next comes the global war on terrorism, where we have discussions. We have Afghanistan, we have Iraq, we have all of the ancillary small conflicts in places like the Philippines and the Horn of Africa, where we have a somewhat stated strategic outcome of ending terrorism, which is dubious at best. But the initial phases of Afghanistan is to remove the Taliban government that provided hearth and haven for Al Qaeda, the removal of Al Qaeda from Afghanistan. But then after those, instead of ending it, we continued and tried to nation build, and we hunted for Osama bin Laden, and we wanted to create a stable democracy in Afghanistan, which history has shown is very difficult. I think there is an argument to be said that we won the battles and lost the war. As we pulled out in 2021, we saw Afghanistan revert back to Taliban control. Now, granted, this is a different Taliban than it was 20 years ago, the 20 years prior, but it's still not the outcome that we were hoping for. In Iraq in 2003, I was part of the invasion. We fought to overthrow the government. We did it so fast. We invaded in March, and by the end of April, the Ba'athist government was gone. Everyone had kind of filtered into the population, and we began to fight a long-term insurgency, an urban insurgency that was deadly and horrendous. And again, while the Iraqi government is still, again, ostensibly democratic, it is still being struggled, but it's still not the greatest place. We have the long-lasting implications of Islamic fundamentalists. We have the Islamic State, Sunni and Shia sectarian violence, and it's. I'd say that I don't know if we could necessarily say that we lost the war. I'd say that it was almost a draw, and in this case, it's just such an interesting stake as things are heading out. But even in this case, now as we talk about Iran, we have strategic outcomes that no one knows, and I understand the idea of playing it coy and having operations be under wraps. We don't want to give anything away to the enemy. However, we now know that we are engaged in conflict with Iran. I believe the American public has a right to understand and know what the strategic outcomes of this war are supposed to be. This is not something where you need to keep it hidden. I'm not asking for operational secrets. I'm not asking for tactical maneuvers and deployments. What I'm asking for is, what are the goals of this conflict against Iran? What are we striving for? What are our men and women who are dying in conflict with Iran? What are they dying for? No one has an answer. No one has a solid answer. Within a couple of days of this conflict starting, you got 6 different answers from 6 different people, right? And we constantly have these weird Department of Defense press briefings where Hegseth is attacking the news media, questioning their patriotism, comparing them to the Philistines. No, sorry, the Pharisees in the Bible, which is wholly inappropriate on multiple levels. You have General Dan Kane, who is, he's just kind of in a weird place already, but he's just giving statistics about munitions expended, about targets successfully prosecuted. We have weird Christian nationalist talking points being tied to the rescue of downed aviators, which, if you believe in a divine being and you see their hand in the rescue of them, fine, right? But don't make up fallacies about text messages saying God is good coming from the communicators that can't do such things, right? So this is a problem. It's becoming propaganda, but we're not getting true outcomes or true desires. So I'm very concerned. Mr. Evans is very concerned. I will post the link to Mr. Evans' article in the description below. There's a lot there, and I think that it is really important for those of us who worked in these spaces and you as a citizen to question your government, right? And it doesn't matter which side. If you have the right, and I would say the duty, to question what we are doing, right? We as Americans have a long history of skepticism. We overthrew the government. One of the very first most patriotic acts that we celebrate is a piece of property damage, tossing tea overboard. So I would say question, ask, read. That's the whole point of this, is to help inform people and to have a conversation. As always, if you have something to say, please get in the comments. I'm very, very interested to see what any of you have about either of these stories, the election in Hungary and this article, Tactical Success and Strategic Failure. This has been one that I've been really interested in. These are both topics that I knew right away as soon as I saw them. I was going to talk about them. Like, it was the easiest topics to pick so far. I would love for you to read my newest piece, A10's and Decision, on Substack. I'm going to put a thing right here where it is whiskymo.substack.com. You can find it there, or a link in the description below where you can find access to my Substack. Please subscribe. You can also down below find links to all my stuff. There's an About Me. There's links to other videos that I like, to other podcasts that I have done. You can also find links to my Patreon. Again, I don't have rewards yet. I'm still trying to figure that out. On the Patreon, you can also choose to support me if you would like. But as always, please gently caress that like button. Subscribe. If you want to know when videos come out, hit the notification bell. And I hope to see you again at the end of the week.